Alright, it's day 475 of this Growing Passion Fruit from Seed series. I intended for this series to go on for a second season and possibly bear some fruit, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen, and as you can tell from the title of this episode, it says finale, so it's pretty much over. So it's been in a continual struggle. It's been spawning new leaves very often, but shedding those leaves. These ones that I showed you just now with the white spots on them, they just have this bleached appearance and they shed within a week or two. So I don't know what the deal is. Can touch upon that more later, but for now it's just making a lot of work. I could use these leaves for compost as I did in the past, but I don't think lack of nutrients is the prime problem here. So one of my viewers pointed me to a video that led me to another video because it was covering the same nursery not far from where I live, and the channel is called Gary's Best Gardening, and it's quite an excellent resource. It contains a lot of videos about the science behind soil, and me having a scientific background myself, I immediately identified with what he was talking about, both in terms of my experiences with potting mix and wild soil that I've brought in. So to make a long story short, soil is mostly minerals. It's ground up rock powder caused by eons of erosion, and it may contain organic content and some clay, which is both necessary and present almost everywhere in soils worldwide. But that organic content is about less than 1% in nature on average, and for farmers they could go a little higher and up the organic content of their soil that they're using to grow crops up to say 1.1%. But that differs completely from what I've been using over the past 5 years, which is Miracle-Gro potting mix. If you follow my channel since 2013, you'll see that that's mostly what I've used, save for one melon series that I did indoors in 2014, where I lugged a backpack full of 50 pounds of wild California hill dirt from a construction site and used that to grow a vine indoors. And eventually that got some mildew, but it did really well in the beginning. The vines under even weak LED artificial lights, I encourage you to go back and watch that series, at least in the beginning, kind of skim through it. The leaves were just enormous, and it was really shocking. But later on, due to it being indoors, it got this powdery mildew mold, and it didn't really go anywhere. The lights I had weren't strong enough. So I quit using wild dirt because it's so heavy. Just one big pot like this would weigh possibly 60 or 70 pounds, I bet. So as you can see here, the stems are slowly getting bleached. The vascular tissue just turns like a spongy white from the cross sections. And this is basically going nowhere. So getting back to the soil, I think I was on the right track actually with getting wild dirt. And I tried doing so again in 2017 with many of these plant series, such as actually my mango, the Joshua tree, for all of my plants actually. In the latter half of 2017, I got some wild hill dirt and sifted out all the big pebbles and rocks and used that to sprinkle a layer on top of my potting mix, because all my plants were growing so slow. They were getting off to really slow starts, and I think it's pretty much spot on for other people to say that I sterilized the potting mix and that killed off all the beneficial microbes. I agree. I think that's what happened. So I had to do that, however, to get rid of things like spider mites that come with potting mix when you buy new. So after sterilizing and seeing the slow results, I decided to go out and get some wild hill dirt, sprinkle it in, and I knew that that would reseed the potting mix with microbes. But what I think actually ended up happening was it congealed with the potting mix at the top. Maybe it's more fine and clay content, or higher, I mean, and it would just form these plates, these congealed plates that would be brittle, and they would seal in the moisture into the potting mix. So what I learned from this channel, Gary's Best Gardening, is that if plants aren't meant to grow in piles of dead plant matter, and compost, more specifically potting mixes that are sold since the 60s, are all basically wood chips and twigs, bark, things like that, aside from whatever else they put in. It's made to be lightweight and very, very absorbent, and it's also a perfect medium for growing mushrooms. If you watch some of my series in 2013 and on, I believe, yeah, my first year I had a lot of mushrooms growing in. So that was without sterilizing the potting mix. After sterilizing the potting mix in, let's say, 2016, 2017, I never saw any mushrooms or spider mites again, but I still had the occasional fungus gnat, and that's not a problem these days, perhaps due to the powerful insecticides that my apartment complex has sprayed around, because I've noticed a lot of dead ants on this table, and after a while there were just no more bug problems. So at this point you can see that the plant is clearly dead, and it's easy to just say, oh, that's due to overwatering or root rot, but remember, for most of 2017 I could just water this thing in an unlimited fashion. I moved it over here because I thought that the leaves were not fond of too much light. Remember, in the latter half of 2017, the vines had extended all the way to this side of the balcony, and the foliage here was always green and lush and doing pretty well. So how come moving this whole pot over here didn't rescue it? I think that's because by sprinkling in this new wild dirt, as I had mentioned in one of my other recent episodes, I basically seeded new microorganisms in there, and combined with the new deep watering after a few weeks and months, that really accelerated the rate of decomposition. As I've mentioned with some of my other pots, I forgot which episode, I said that it seems like the potting mix really broke down and became a sludge, basically a black sludge. So a lot of people have watched my videos lately and said that's because you're just drowning your stuff, you're letting it drown in a pool of water. That's only because I had thumbnail pictures for some of these videos showing the reflection of water on top, because it takes so long for the water to percolate through the congealed layer of dirt and potting mix on the top, as with my Joshua tree and whatnot. But actually I haven't been watering that much. There was a period of time from October 2017 maybe, there was a heat wave, and then I was afraid of root rot and whatnot, so I didn't water much. And eventually, for my mango pot, for instance, it was just so light. It felt very light to the touch, and I dug in there and found out most of the potting mix was dry. So I don't really think that's what's going on. I think there's a lot of validity to what I saw on that other channel, that basically compost is not meant to, potting mix here is not meant to last for, say, 8 months or whatever amount of months that some of my recent series have gone on for before the plants mysteriously died. Gary says that maybe in 5 months, most potting mixes are just completely a rotten mess, and that's toxic to the root systems. So if you're growing vegetables and flowers and things like that for the short term, in most parts of America, or the world even in the northern hemisphere, the potting mix will be good for a season starting maybe late winter, early spring. People will buy some and then try to grow some flowers and vegetables, and within 5 months it's a rotten mess that's toxic, and then the root system dies. So it's a lot more complex than just saying, oh, it's root rot, you overwatered. I basically think there's a lot of validity to saying that these potting mixes are not designed for long-term use And I've had a lot of success as well. Well, maybe not a lot, but I've had some plants that went on for 2 or 3 years. So I don't think it's a complete failure of a medium. I just think not every plant is suited to being grown in potting mix. So in the future, I'll definitely look to grow my plants in smaller pots to reduce the overwatering potential. But I think for soil medium, where I can in terms of getting a new start, I'll just use a mixture of sand and wild California hill dirt. I think that'll do way better. So I look forward to trying that in the future, and if possible, just fertilizing, either using chemical fertilizer or having organic matter in a thin layer on the top that won't be enveloping the root system. So that's the way things are intended to work in nature. Rain or me watering from the top down, that will cause the nutrients from the breakdown of said organic matter like dead leaves to percolate down into the mineral soil and clay. So that's basically my thoughts on what happened here. I think the addition of wild dirt and all that watering eventually just caused too much decomposition. It attracted a lot of bugs. As many people have said on my channel, a rich soil will attract a lot of bugs, and that's exactly what happened. Before my apartment complex sprayed a lot of pesticides. I actually sprayed some pesticides too because the bug problem was getting out of control. So that's what the root system looks like. It doesn't look like it's completely dead, but the shoot system clearly was nearly completely dead. So that's it, folks. Please come back to my YouTube channel in the future for more plant growing series.